particular need to be particularly concerned about cap and trade, because if in fact it were to become law, here we live in a state where 90% of our power comes from coal-powered plants. So we should probably anticipate, and all across the country, seeing our electric bills not only rise 20 to 60%, but all of our corporations as well. And we've already cited here tonight that the number one concern in this district is job creation. And one of the factors that is sure to stifle any future job creation and destroy existing jobs, sending them offshore, is raising the cost of energy here in the United States of America. To me, and I've shared this at the debate the other night, several months ago, you heard our world leaders come to the conclusion that they were going to focus their efforts on reducing the Earth's temperature by 3.4 degrees between now and 2020, I believe it was. To me, it reveals something very serious that's happened among mankind. We've become so arrogant that we honestly think we control everything. And isn't it interesting that our leaders are so willing to spend their energy and efforts and dollars to try to solve problems they can't possibly solve, and yet the ones that require common sense, like balancing a budget, there's no money or effort to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And the next response will come from Mr. Schiffer.
Yes, thank you. I wish I had 10 minutes to answer this one. I've been studying the whole cap and trade legislation and the global warming phenomena for quite a few years. I was speaking out against all this nonsense about 2 years ago, back when it wasn't cool or wise to say anything against the establishmentarians out there. I believe, quite frankly, that global warming is the fraud of the century. It's a complete lie. And myself, like all of you in the room, especially the Christians out there, I know we're fed up about being lied to all the time, but these globalists, these liberals in our country, led by Al Gore and Obama, they're lying to us on a daily basis. This whole cap and trade formula was set up to oppose a communist-style regulatory regime on our nation. This is nothing other than the loss of our freedoms. And very quickly here, you may not know this, but do a Google search on this or Wikipedia. Czech President Václav Klaus, who used to be a communist leader in the Eastern Bloc, he's been speaking out against the global warming fraud, saying that basically this is a communist agenda. And he said basically when the wall came down, all of the communists left the Eastern Bloc and fled over to the environmental movement.
Thank you, Mr. Schiffer. And the final 1 minute reply will come from Jim Renacci.
Thank you. You know, let's really get down to the basic point here. This is the largest tax increase in the history with this energy tax. It will cost every family and every household close to $1,600 per household. We can talk all about what that does, but here it kills jobs. It's a job-killing tax. If my small business has to pay more dollars for energy, and by the way, 88% of our energy in this district is coal produced. If my small business has to pay more money to take care of those costs, my small business cannot employ anybody else. And again, if we want to get the economy going, we've got to get back to those basic ideas. Now let's talk about what it can do. And you know, we talk about, well, we're going to save the environment. We're not going to be able to do anything with the environment when you still have China and India, by the way, doing exactly what they want to do. So our country, even if it would go to this cap and trade legislation, which I'm totally opposed to, but if it did, we still have two major countries in this world that are going to continue to do what they're doing. And let's face it, the climate and the temperatures have moved up and down over the centuries. So we don't need man telling us what to do. We don't need government telling us what to do.
Thank you very much. You're listening to the 2010 16th Congressional District Republican Party Primary Candidate Forum, sponsored by the Ohio Christian Alliance on News Talk 1480 WHBC. All four of the filed candidates are participating in this evening's candidate forum, and the candidates' names again are Paul Schiffer, Doyle Smith, Jim Renacci, and Matt Miller. We'll now proceed to our 8th question of the evening, and the first respondent offered 2 minutes to respond is Mr. Renacci. And the question is, currently 56 cents of every tax dollar is used to pay for interest on our national debt. By 2020, 77 cents of every tax dollar will be needed to pay the interest on our national credit card. What, in your opinion, is the best way to deal with this runaway federal deficit spending?
You know, it's interesting, and again, I keep going back to life experience. 27 years of life experience with running a business, balancing a budget. When your interest costs grow that large, it takes away from your ability to manage your business and run. What would we do? What would I do? What have I done in the past? I've taken over businesses that were troubled, just like the federal government. The first thing I would do is I would freeze expenses. All expenses other than military expenses need to be frozen. Same thing I've done in my business world. Same thing I did at the city of Wadsworth the first time I got there. I said, we need to get our expenses in line. Once we get them frozen, we can start looking at them. We can start cutting wasteful expenses. You know, Congressman Pence, who I do admire, has put some, he's trying to push for, we only spend 20% of our budget, or our GMP. And we need to really, you know, put a statutory cap. This is the kind of thing we need to do. We need to get fiscal responsibility in government. We need to get the train and the dollars shut down. We're spending way too much money. But again, it's easy because in the business world, you would do that anyway. You know, I implemented some of those same thought processes when I became the mayor of Wadsworth. I said, we need to start running the city like a business. A lot of people got upset with me, but the truth of it was we needed to do that. We needed to get unnecessary expenses in line, because when the interest rate starts taking that massive amount of dollars, and at the pace we're going, it'll be 60, 70, 80% of each dollar, we're going to have some serious problems with our federal government, and we need to be able to get our spending in line, freeze our expenses. Other than the military, again, I do believe in strong military. We have to continue to support our troops and our military leaders. But ultimately, there are so many wasteful programs in the federal government, we need to eliminate them. I would also say that any new legislation for spending would have to replace any spending bill we have in there today. And I also think that any spending bill would have to be 72 hours looked at before it was ever done, but it would still be under the freeze.
Thank you very much. And then first 1 minute reply will come from Mr. Schiffer.
Thank you. Let me put this very quickly in perspective about the federal debt. From George Washington until Ronald Reagan, approximately 1776 to 1980, that's a total of 204 years. America went from 0 to $1 trillion in federal debt. In just 22 years, from 1980 to 2002, the U.S. debt grew a sixfold to $6 trillion. Over the past 7 years, it doubled from $6 trillion to $12 trillion, and in one more year, under Obama, the 2010 budget, it will grow another $2 trillion to $14 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office expects $1 trillion or more dollar deficits for perhaps a decade or more. Folks, in order to resolve this, we need to shut down a lot of the government agencies, bringing back, following the 10th Amendment movement, the state sovereignty movement, shut down the EPA, the Department of Labor, and other agencies that are wasting our federal dollars. And we need to hold the Federal Reserve to accountability. That's another story, but it's a part of this answer. And also the very fact that we're losing millions of jobs a year from these trade deals like GATT and NAFTA. We need to do something to address all of this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller, your response.
Most of you already know that the top 5 expenses of the federal government are defense spending, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt. If we're going to truly balance the budget, we're going to have to work in those 5 areas. First of all, let me say I absolutely do support defense spending, and I think what some gentlemen up here have called earmarks to companies that benefit the military, I would call defense spending. And there is a difference. I don't see any money that is spent on improving our weapons technology or our armed forces as an earmark. That's defense spending. We need to continue that because obviously we have enemies all around the world and they seem to be getting stronger. The next thing we've got to take a look at is Medicare and Medicaid. Your Democrats right now that are in leadership seem to be confident that there's $400 billion worth of fraud that can be cleaned up in our existing Medicare and Medicaid system. Well, let's go ahead and table the notion of a new health care system and start cleaning up that $400 billion, and we can use it towards these interest payments. Not only that, Social Security, I guess it's not going to be there since it's already dissipated before our very eyes. We're going to have to take a serious look at saying to people, listen,